Hey there, we're into the third introductory video for Hype, and I want to introduce, or at least review, some of the functions, some of the interface parts, and look at the timeline a little bit closer. So we have our stage, we have a timeline, we have one element in the timeline, which is the square in the middle of the page, or stage there. We have inspector, controls, and resources. Nothing up there yet. So let's look. Last time I think we simply gave this that's right, it was a red square with a blue frame. Let's see that frame a little heavier here. Okay. And we created an animation that slid from one side to the other. Let's repeat that and look at some other controls. Nothing here in the timeline itself, and nothing in the properties related to animations on the timeline. So let's begin. And I think we simply went through how to create the most basic movements. We identify the element that we want to move. We hit record button. We set the period. 3 seconds. We tell it what movement it's going to make, and then we stop recording. Back to middle, and this is what we see. Now we're going to get a little deeper into the timeline and how it will affect the elements on the stage. But first off, let's look at some other ways we can, or other characteristics of elements we can animate. By selecting the element, we can see that the panel in the inspector lights up, and we've seen the control for the color. We have gradient, and we have image. Let's not get ahead of ourselves too much, but that's pretty much what it says, so we can fill it with a gradient. We could animate that gradient so that it flips from one side to the other if we wanted to. We could change the size of the border from one side to the other if we wanted to. We could change the color of the element from one side to the other. We could change the border from a solid to a groove or a dotted from one side to the other. Any of the controls, anywhere you find in the inspector, are all animatable in that they will change the nature of the element, and we simply need to record that change on the movement. The opacity we can change. We can put a drop shadow on it, and there are other filtering effects as well. The metrics relate to the size and the physical size and positioning of the element. So there's rotation. We can, if we wanted to, so we've got this guy at the beginning of the timeline. Not sure what happened to the color, but I'm going to hit record. I'm going to move this down to this end, and I'm going to ask that to rotate 360 and stop recording. Go back to the beginning. Whoops, what happened? Let's try that again. I hit record, go to the end of the timeline. At this point, we want it to be, let's say 120. I don't know what happened here. Go back, stop record, go back. Interesting. Okay, I wanted 360. I'm going to change that fairly easily. Remember the keyframes? I'm going to the rotation feed. The rotation characteristic is down here. I'm going to highlight that keyframe, and then I'm going to change the rotation to 360. See what happens. I didn't have to record it. I changed the characteristic or the control in the properties panel. I just simply changed the value of that keyframe and it changed the animation. Didn't need to record that time. The timeline is really, really interesting in that it's a physical thing. If I wanted to change when this animation occurs in my animation, I now have a 5-second animation instead of a 3-second animation, but the movements don't change until, let's get back to the beginning. Stop. Get back to the beginning. They don't start moving until it hits that animation, that blue bar. Maybe I want all of that to take longer. I can highlight that bar, and you can see that my keyframes are all advanced at the 2 and the 5 second. I'm going to grab this keyframe and move it back here. And I think I'll grab this one as well and move it back here. Now instantly I have a longer animation. Remember, change over time. I can impact the change by all of the attributes in the inspector panel, and I can change the time here in the timeline. Another really interesting feature about type makes it fairly straightforward. I'm going to add another element here, and I'm going to throw that up here. We may have seen this in the animation before. I'll change the values of that just to be a little bit different, just for the heck of it there. Right now, that polygon has no animation, no movements attached to it. I'm going to select the animation attached to the rectangle. I'm going to copy, select the polygon, and paste. Now both of those are going to move with the exact same characteristics. I could move this out so that, in this point, the polygon doesn't rotate until after the square is all done. Now both of these are pretty slow, boring animations. Let's squeeze them up here a little bit. Oops. Whoa, 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 steady horse, steady horse. Be careful, you just grab just a single keyframe and move back down, move this back down. So you can see you have fairly careful, precise controls down to the fraction of a second on any of the movements. You have really as many characteristics as you want. You have a whole bunch of ways that you can change things and control the time for the change as well. One more dive into animation. You have control over the elements, you have control over the time, you have control over their attributes in the timeline and in the inspector panel. We'll look further at what are called motion paths in the next video.